Now, Patrick, one thing you mentioned was stimulus. I was wondering if you could go in a little bit more about what you see as a stimulus measure, and just so we're all on the same page.
Different things, and you could make the argument that already for the last few months we've been focused on stimulus with some of the measures that's been done to put more liquidity into the market. To provide the ability for banks to lend more, lowering interest rates, those are all stimulus measures, and those are things that could continue as well. It might be tax rebates, things of that nature. Or it may be something much more tangible, like government funding for infrastructure spending, and that's really been the typical focus for stimulus. And there certainly will be a focus on that. But given the statistics that you pointed to and the people that are disproportionately impacted, stimulus might be very different. But the overall approach really is to boost employment, get more money moving in our markets, get more people spending, and get people back on their feet. And the type of measures we're looking at are things that are going to be able to do that as quickly and effectively as possible.
Yeah, so I feel like the infrastructure funding is the great example from previous recessions where the federal government stepped up and provided a lot of infrastructure funding. There was kind of two aspects to that. There was the short-term, people get jobs to build this infrastructure. And then the long-term, we have this infrastructure now. Do you kind of see that need for short-term and long-term in a stimulus measure, or does it really vary depending on the project?
I think it shouldn't just be a focus on what is shovel-ready projects. It should also be shovel-worthy projects. And the money that's going to go towards stimulus is, at least from our point of view, it's likely going to push kind of to the front a lot of our plans for infrastructure spending. So it's important that the way that it's being spent is going to advance us and kind of create positive legacies and not just get people back to work right away. So I think there's definitely a good balance to find there. I know from speaking with the elected officials on the coast, there's a lot of very, very shovel-worthy and shovel-ready projects on the Sunshine Coast that would fit the bill. So I think I think you really need to take the short-term and long-term view. But the other areas of spending that are being considered now is on social infrastructure as well. You consider that the people that are disproportionately out of work and the ways of getting people back to work, one of the major challenges is going to be childcare. It's typically a provincial responsibility, but I know there's a lot of discussions happening right now on scaling up the federal contribution to provincially delivered childcare services.
So you mentioned the balance of stimulus money. I think going back to the typical example of infrastructure, we think of big projects, build a bridge, build the SkyTrain, build whatever. That's urban stimulus. I really wonder how much that stimulates our rural economy. So what would you say the difference between an urban stimulus measure and a rural stimulus measure is? And is there a difference in principle between the two?
Yeah, well, if we're thinking about physical infrastructure, it could be the same thing. But it may be very different. One of the areas that we've been looking at, and it's really been highlighted during the pandemic, is the challenges if you don't have access to high-speed internet. So actually, a few years ago, we created the Universal Broadband Fund, which has been really made some incredible strides on getting people access to high quality, fast internet. But there's a huge amount of work to do, and in our platform, we've committed to having the entire country connected to this type of broadband connection by 2030. So a lot of those efforts are really going to be sped up with this, because you can see really the importance of people getting access to information quickly. and also how much work can be done from home, and the type of opportunities that could open up. So I think that's a type of infrastructure spending that will particularly benefit rural areas. But also when you're talking about things like green infrastructure, like with water infrastructure, even if it's building roads, these are things that are needed in rural or urban areas. So I think there's there's some differences, but in many ways it could be the same.
So boiling that down, I want to talk about the Sunshine Coast. I think there's a lot of opportunity here on the Sunshine Coast. So I was wondering if you could speak to some growth industries that you see on the Sunshine Coast and where potentially a good place to target those investments would be.
Yeah, well, I think the Sunshine Coast has incredible assets to take advantage of, and when you're looking at what some of the biggest growth industries are, it's important to look what were the growth industries last year, but also how the pandemic's changed it. And I think that there's going to be a huge push for people to move out of urban areas, or there'll be more acceptance from some of the big companies of letting people work remotely. And so I think that's going to create a lot of opportunities, because who wouldn't want to live on the Sunshine Coast rather than have to commute to their office, be able to work from home. So I think in the tech sector, there's a huge potential there. There's going to be a big focus on the agricultural sector and making sure that we have local food production. I was looking at a statistic recently that was showing how much land the Sunshine Coast has in ALR that's not being used. I think there's a huge potential there to scale up local food production. So I see that as a big opportunity. The other area, this is already, as I understand it, about a $250 million a year industry in the informal cannabis industry. I think there's been a big focus on kind of large scale producers of cannabis, but I think there's also an opportunity for craft growers with some regulatory changes. So I think those are some of the big areas that I see in the future. But you could kind of name the sector, and I think the coast could be very well positioned.